We are here today with Shawna. She's here to tell her story of another form of what domestic abuse looks like. This is a shape that most people are not familiar with, and I'm just going to let her start her story. Welcome, Shawna.
Okay, thank you so much. So I have a little bit of a wild story, and I'm grateful I'm able to share this in the hopes that, this can help kind of bring awareness to this sort of thing and hopefully help other women, that may experience something similar. We hear the word narcissist thrown out a lot lately. And what I will just say is that I think it's a little overused, and that if you've actually been in a relationship with an actual narcissist, sociopath, you know,
Mm,
it's overused, and it's a feeling that I can't even put into words and describe the kind of torture that psychological torture that you're going to go through, and have to pick your life up from and heal from. So I think it's important for me to use actual first names, of my abusers. I think that I'm only speaking truth and facts and actual events that occurred, and I think that uh, accountability is a big thing, and they should stand on what they did. Um,
I agree.
so yeah, so I'm gonna use real first names. So in August of 2018, I met my ex-boyfriend of 5 years at a Twins game, with a mutual friend of mine who I'd known since I was 16 years old. So I was not really in a place where I was wanting to date, or anything like that. But we went to this Twins game. We were having some drinks. We were having fun. And this man named Joe was there. Um, and one thing led to another, and I kind of started to realize I had way too much to drink. And um, we were back at his house where he lived in Minneapolis at the time, with a roommate. And hard for me to admit this, but I was actually sexually assaulted that night. Um, and it's something that it took me a lot of years to even realize what had even really happened. Um, and a lot of therapy to even realize that what had happened to me was, that was a sexual assault. Um, I went home. I just remember I was way, um, way too intoxicated to even give consent at the time. Um, and things were happening that I was not comfortable with happening. This was someone I had just met. And I remember at one point kind of like pushing him down and saying no, and then saying like, don't do that. And I remember then I got in, I ordered an Uber and I left and went home. And I remember just feeling really, really ashamed after that happened. Like I really like didn't leave my room for a couple days, and I just felt I was like, I don't like that this happened. This is not something I would do. Um, and he kept kind of reaching out to me, trying to get me to hang out with him again. And I just kind of was blowing him off. Like I just wasn't interested. And one thing, I just wasn't kind of really dealing with what had really happened. but then I also like I didn't want to believe in my head that what had happened was a sexual assault either. I didn't want that to be what had happened to me. So I wound up hanging out with him again. Um, and then again and again and again, and it became where all of the sudden by November, he was asking me to go home with him for Thanksgiving. And I remember thinking, that's really weird. Like we haven't even been seeing each other that long. Um, and I'm from a very small town originally, and he's actually from my same hometown area. I didn't know him in high school, but we I know a lot of the same people, and we're the same age. So things progress, and I'm going home to meet his family. He's talking about a future with me, marriage, all sorts of things, and I just kind of went with it, I guess. And then I started to think, oh wow, I met this really great guy, and he's treating me amazing, and this is the happiest I've ever been, and this is wonderful. And then things started to kind of not add up for me. I kind of felt like his drug and alcohol use was pretty extreme and alarming for me. Um, and just things with his behavior it was kind of off. Like I noticed, like I got an email one day that I saw the next morning that he had signed up my email address for a pornography website at like 4 in the morning on a weeknight. And it like a paid pornography thing. And it was my email address, but his name and credit card information. And I remember being like, that's really bizarre. And I asked him about it, and he had a whole elaborate story for it and even kind of blamed me for it. Well, remember when you used my card to buy this stuff for the Elton John concert that one time? What website were you on? Because I bet it got stolen. My info must have, and I'm like, I don't think Amazon, you know, um, Amazon's a pretty safe site. So, but I was in such denial. I'd never experienced anything like this before. Um, and then things kind of progressed where he started getting really possessive and jealous of me. Like I couldn't talk to any other, even platonic male friends or anything without him getting jealous. And then all of a sudden he's going through my phone. And I had not given him my passcode. So that meant that he had been like watching me input my passcode and figured it out. And then he would start to get in arguments with me about just anything. And then he decided that I want us, he, I want us to have this relationship where um, we both can know each other's passwords. And so he gave me his password, and I didn't want the kind of relationship where I needed to check somebody's phone to ensure that they weren't cheating on me. So I wanted to be able to trust the person I was with, and that's I thought I had that type of a relationship. But about a year into the relationship, one night my gut was just telling me, you need to just check it, just to be sure. Just check it. Something's off with his behavior. And so I ended up checking his phone and could not believe what I found in there. I've never seen anything like it. I've never been exposed to anything like it. Maybe I'm lived a very naive life up until this point. But he was cheating on me with multiple women using sex websites. things I had, like I said, I've never even heard of. Um, and multiple different platforms to cheat on, including social media platforms. So this was actually the night right before I was supposed to be a bridesmaid in a family member's wedding. And so I'm obviously hysterical, couldn't believe what I had just found, confronted him, and still had to somehow get to this wedding. I was not in any shape to even drive. I mean, I was completely hysterical. And I let him drive and come with. And I have no idea how I even made it through all of that, but and I felt terrible, that this was happening on someone's best day of their life, and um, so I, so he kind of came clean to all his friends and family. He decided he was going to go to treatment for sex and porn addiction and alcoholism and drug addiction, and took a leave of absence from work, ended up coming, I took him into my home because it was, I can't even explain it. It's like I just was so traumatized at that time that I went into this caregiver role and like I needed to help save his life. I threw a surprise birthday for him at my house, like a week after finding all of this out. Like instead of ending the relationship and leaving that situation, I like just it's almost like Stockholm syndrome. I really can't explain
Do you think
what
that it
happened.
has like it's like a form of trauma bonding?
I
I feel
would
like
say,
a
yeah.
connection to something like that where it's almost like taking somebody else's downfalls and trying to take care of it for them because
Hmm.
because they're not taking care of it or because they're
Right,
not able to or whatever. So it just
right,
becomes like that nurturing part of yeah.
right. Because he did. He showed up really wounded. He let me know his past and it wasn't great. And, he had this whole sob story about how, oh, I wasn't a great guy in the past, but I did therapy and I've changed now and I don't want to be that guy anymore. And just on and on about how great I was, how it was so great. He finally met someone he could trust fully. Um, and I just fell for it, just hook, line, and sinker. I fell for it. And I think I thought it was my responsibility to help him as his partner. And it's not. It's never going to be anyone's responsibility but their own to help themselves. So I took him into my home. It goes without saying when you stay with somebody who's been cheating on you, things are never going to be the same. Um, so it was not a healthy relationship. We stayed together for 5 years in total. Um, and it was about 1 year into the relationship that I found all of this out. Um, so over the next few years, I thought he'd at least quit living that double life and gotten better with the drugs and alcohol, but he just got better at hiding it. And I was so traumatized that I just kind of went into this survival mode and just kind of didn't want to believe it and just was trying to keep peace in my household and figure out how I could just survive this, I guess. Um, and what should have happened was we should have gotten into therapy. But I've been in therapy for like 20 years, off and on, more extensive therapy heavily over the last 3 years since he left, and this has all happened. But it's just something I was never prepared for or familiar with. And I thought I was so ashamed of what had happened And I was so embarrassed that I stayed with someone who did this to me, um, that it's like I just kind of kept shrinking myself down and just kept trying to live in denial and survival and act like this didn't happen to me. Like I was so ashamed and embarrassed, and I just didn't know. From the outside, people probably thought that we had this adorable, sweet, healthy, happy relationship, and we did not. It was torture. I mean, I gained probably 60 to 70 pounds. I was a shell of myself. I don't even recognize myself from back then. I started, because he drank so much, it caused me to drink so much. And not only that, but I think the guilt of the fact that I stayed with somebody that like assaulted me the first night I met him. Like it just, and just everything I didn't recognize at that time that everything he was doing was abusive. Was he beating me physically? No, he wasn't. He didn't ever hit me. Um, but it actually took a therapist saying to me, but Shawna, you do realize that is physical abuse, what he was doing to you and your body and putting your sexual health at risk and your fertility at risk. And, I'm 41 now and I don't have children. And I made it very clear when I first met him that fertility was important to me and my sexual health was important to me. I've always been very careful. Um, and just for me to not have a say at all in what had happened to me and who I was getting involved with. Um, Coercive control is like a very serious, serious thing that I want women to be aware of. You can't possibly consent to something if you are not being given truth and facts about what's actually going on. If someone is lying straight to your face that they're monogamous with you, that you're in a monogamous consensual relationship with this person, if that's what they're telling you, but that's not true, that's not consent. Somebody doesn't have to hold you down and forcefully rape you for it to be sexual assault. Um, I think there's a lot of gray area with sexual assault, and it's too bad that our criminal justice system and legal system isn't catching up to some of this stuff that's going on in current times. Um, I think that I I don't have much of an explanation with why I stayed in what I did for so long, other than I never could have imagined that for my life. I'm a very strong, intelligent, independent woman, and this is not something that I have ever could have imagined would be my story and my life. Um, you you're gonna have to. I'll just say I've been connected with a lot of other women who've been through similar things, and you're going to have to, my best advice would be do not date immediately after this happens. Take a good couple of years and don't date. Do not get involved in another relationship. I'm speaking from experience that you will repeat cycles. And I know it's hard, and I know we all want to find a healthy, happy, loving relationship, and we all want stability in our home and finances. Um, but I wish I had taken a good solid couple of years and just done extensive healing and therapy. And I wish that there were more resources available for women to get the kind of trauma therapy that they need after this sort of a thing happens. And I wish it was more understood. I, the other piece I was going to say is get comfortable with not being believed. Get comfortable with being called crazy. Get comfortable with, and that part still really bothers me.
Yep. Yeah.
because I'm not crazy. I'm not making this up. Reactive abuse is a real thing. If an analogy I like to use is like if you put a wild animal in a cage for long enough and you start depleting the animal of its resources and of its safety and of its well-being, that animal is going to start to fight back and start to do things that it would maybe normally not do in that situation to survive, to try to survive and get out. And so, have I done things that I'm not super proud of? Yeah. But I know who I am, and I know that I'm a loyal, loving, honest person. And I know how I showed up in the relationship and tried to help somebody who desperately needed help. And I know that I did not deserve what happened to me and what is kind of continuing to happen to me. Um, so that's been the toughest part is kind of feeling like I'm being judged for having a lot of drama or
Mhm.
and this could just be how I'm feeling, honestly, but it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to go through. It's shameful. You feel a lot of guilt around it.
Yeah.
Um,
So just want to put this out there. When somebody treats you in these type of ways, you don't hold responsibility for their actions towards you. I
correct.
understand that, like myself specifically, when I have reflected back on some of my situations, it's just like I felt guilty. I felt like a fool. I felt, whatever. Why did I stay
Yeah.
so long? Why did I keep giving chances? Why did I take on their
Mhm.
burden as my own to take care of? Their battle was not mine to fight. Um, and and honestly, I think it's just like a programming from the relationship, and it's
Mhm.
programming my mind. It's programming me to live in the chaos of it all. Um, and I do own responsibility in the part of staying too long, in the part of giving too many chances and stuff like that.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't hold any responsibility for what they did to me.
1,000%.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then, just I know what it's like to not be believed with the bruises and
Hmm.
all.
Hmm.
And well, they're such a great guy. And, it's sometimes, you don't know their darkest parts of them sometimes,
Hmm.
even us as the victims, it doesn't, don't, we don't always know the darkest parts of our abuser. You don't know what they're capable of until they do it. And then even then it's just like, where did that come from? What was that? And all the promises and all the everything. And it's just really hard. And then that's the part where you are traumatized, right? It's just like it takes a split second to do something to like just detach, like to short circuit your brain or something, and then they got that open to start programming you again, like how they want you to be.
Yep.
They want you to show up for them and how, so there's a lot, like there's so many similarities with, even without the bruises, it's so similar. It's just like they function
Hmm.
the same.
Yeah. Truly.
Mhm.
It's crazy to me how similar these types of men are. And they kind of all show up the same way. They show up as wounded. They show up as, well, I've not always been a great guy, but I've changed. And, they play on your empathy.
Mhm.
They kind of, it's like they're very good at just conning people into believing who they really are. And no one would ever believe who this guy really is. He's so gentle. He's so soft-spoken. He's so emotionally regulated. He's so calm.
Mhm.
He's so intelligent. He's so articulate. You would never believe who he actually really is in the double life that he lives. Um, and that's what's been really hard, I guess, too, is having to combat like, but I have all the evidence and facts to show you who he actually really is.
Mhm.
If anyone would take the time or care to see, but it's just, it's, I'm at a point now, I'm 3 years, a little over 3 years since he left. And I genuinely, I want to move on with my life. I don't want this to be my life story. But I've learned so much from it and grown so much as a person from it. And 3 years ago, when people would tell me that, I would get so angry and I would say, yeah, you don't get it. You don't get it. I went through torture. I wish nobody should have to go through this. And I would have rather not gone through any of this. But truly, it has made me who I am now. And it's made me so much stronger. And if I can do anything from this, um, I guess the biggest thing I want to do is help other women in similar situations and to just spread awareness about this sort of thing so that it doesn't happen to anyone else ever again.
Yeah.
Um, and just I'm big on accountability. Like I just think, I'm happy to take accountability for things I've done that haven't been perfect, but nothing I've done even comes close to comparing to, what has happened to me and the lack of accountability from people on the side of the abuser. Um, and it is a very dark and lonely place when you heal from something like that. It's it's torture, truly. I can't even articulate into words how much pain I felt. I was I had such bad complex PTSD that I was uncontrollably vomiting like every day, nonstop for at least 6 months at a time. And it still happens if I get a PTSD flare up to this day. I'm a very sensitive and neurodivergent individual. I've got ADHD and some sensory stuff that I deal with and have my whole life. And it took me a long time to even figure out some of what was going on with me. Um, and I was misdiagnosed by one therapist as having borderline personality disorder, and I don't have that. It was very clearly complex PTSD from an abusive relationship, and I've heard that happens a lot,
Mhm.
and that kind of added to my trauma at a very fragile state because I was like, oh my gosh, wait, I have what? Um, and I've since spoken to a therapist who I've seen for over like 10 years, and she's like, no, Shawna, you don't have that. And no, nothing against, if someone does, nothing against any sort of
Mhm.
psychological diagnosis. I'm just saying there's so much that can go on during a very fragile time in your life
Yeah.
right after you get out of this abusive situation that it can cause extra trauma
Mhm.
while you're already traumatized and trying to heal.
Mhm.
Um, and I fought and clawed my way out of a very dark hole. I decided that month that he left that I was never going to ever drink again. I decided, and so it's been over 3 years since I've had any alcohol. I decided there was one of two ways I could let this destroy me and totally overtake my life and just fall down a hole, or I could change everything and become better and not let this take me down. And I chose option two. And it hasn't been a perfect road, and I still make mistakes. I'm human. But I think I'm doing so much better than I was, 3 years ago. And like I said, I just hope I can help some other people and just spread awareness and spread love and positivity and just know that I'm a safe space and I would never judge anyone who's been through similar. And I've had multiple connections with multiple women reaching out to me, sharing similar stories. And it's honestly been so heartwarming for me to just connect with people, and to just see how prevalent this issue actually is. It's alarming, and I hope there can be some change. I think there needs to be more support on men's mental health and surrounding, just men being able to process their own traumas and feelings and that sort of thing as well.
I was thinking that same thing earlier when you mentioned like more help for women that are going through this. And a big thing
Mhm.
with, I'm typically on the side of like the physical part of the abuse because that's my history. Um,
Mhm.
so that's usually just what I speak about. But just having like the prevention method or the measurement, just
Yeah.
whether the person has done it before or not, are the flags there, are the clues there? Do we, is there any way to get in front of it? And I mean, truly, a lot of it could be just things that they saw growing up, not
Mhm.
not giving an out to anybody that's doing this stuff, but like, how do we stop making victims? How do we stop
Yeah.
acting and start being proactive, and that all goes into the prevention, but how do you know how to
Mhm.
how to just get at the prevention? What is the right way?
Mhm.
Mhm.
In my personal experience, typically these types of narcissistic men come from families that have experienced abuse. They've experienced abuse as children, and neglect, and had, a hard childhood. And I was never very familiar with how the cycle of abuse works, and I'm very familiar with it now. I see why people get stuck in that cycle.
Mhm.
Um, it
Yeah. I
I
think.
see a lot of enabling from mothers, honestly, who are also domestic abuse survivors themselves, and maybe aren't ready to admit that their son has kind of turned out just like their father, or aren't ready. There's a lot of shame that and guilt that goes into all of this stuff, and it's really it's sad.
Mhm.
Um, it is sad, but
I feel like.
like I said, you can't don't drown yourself trying to help somebody else
Mm,
ever. That would be the biggest piece of advice I would have is it's wonderful to be an empath. It's wonderful to care and love and want to help other people. We should all be that way. But just don't. I drown myself trying to save someone else and someone who wouldn't have bat an eyelash to save me, I mean, he left me after 5 years. He broke up with me over text message and just abandoned the household. I had to pack all his things for him. Um,
so was there ever a point, I know like the being with him, like that part was like hard, right? You were talking about just the way you felt going to that wedding. You were talking about you just some of the things that you were going through during the time together. Um, Even in the hardness of that, did you feel like it would be harder to not be with him or harder to stay with him? Did you see, you know what I mean? Did you see a version of you that didn't have him in it? It's just like did he make the choice to up and leave and then you had no choice but to grow from that or to come out of that and decide what's going to be like Shawna 2.0.
yeah, I think it's crazy that it took him leaving me for me to finally be free of that. Um, I think I was so traumatized and trauma bonded, a codependent trauma bond, and um, truly, I just thought that this was it for my life. And I also didn't really have the resources to even afford to really live and manage this was all going on through like 2020 and when everything happened and how, inflation of the housing prices and everything. So
Mhm.
like I didn't really have the resources to even afford financially to manage this household on my own.
Mhm.
Um, and that has been really, really hard since he left. Honestly, I've been struggling majorly financially, but I would choose this any day of the week over having him still in my life. Genuinely, I would. But I just also see why people make decisions for survival and why it is so hard for some women to leave abusive relationships because they just truly don't have the means to get out. And so I have so much respect for the women that are able to get out. Um, I think in my situation too, since we weren't legally married, I got just completely abandoned financially. It just,
Mhm.
uh, there's no spousal support or alimony or any sort of anything that
Any
you get
protection
when
for
you're
you?
not
Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's been really hard. I actually 2021 I went back to school myself to finish a bachelor's degree because it was so much chaos that was going on for so long, and I couldn't there. It's like there was nothing I couldn't change anything for my situation. And so I thought, well, there's one thing I can change. It's I'll get a better degree and maybe I'll get a better job and, things will improve from there. Um, so I did do that. I'm very proud of myself for that. And just for kind of, persevering through what I was going through at that time. Um, and still figuring out a way to make what I could control better for myself. And I'm very thankful that I did go back to school and have the job that I do because I did work in healthcare prior and worked outside of the home. And I don't think that I would have been able to work at all going through this trauma
Mhm.
right after he left. I think I would have lost my job. I'm fortunate that I was able to work from home and I was able to somehow, manage
Yeah.
my workload and get through the days, but it was hard. I've
Yeah.
had a really hard few years. Yeah.
Yeah. Just don't want to cut you off, but we are less than a minute and a half from cutoff point. So is there any closing statements you want to give? I feel like we're going to be back. I feel like we're going to
I
have
would I would love to be back. I have there's a lot more to the story and I
Yeah.
would love just to keep sharing and
Yes.
help in any way that
Mhm.
I can. So, and
I
I'm
have
so
so many
grateful.
questions for you too.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful that I met you and that you
Yeah.
reached out because yeah, I've been wanting to do something like this for a long time. So,
Yeah.